The sky had never burned like this before. Zara crouched at the edge of the cliff, her knuckles pale against the dark stone, watching fire fall from the heavens in long glittering rivers. She was 19 cycles old enough to lead a scouting party, young enough to still feel wonder before fear. Behind her, 8 warriors of the Stoneback clan gripped their obsidian-tipped spears and said nothing. They had no words for what they were seeing. Zara. It was Kovu, her second, a broad-shouldered man whose face bore the 3 diagonal scars of a lion hunt. He pressed close to her shoulder. "That is not lightning." "No," she agreed. "It is not." The falling lights slowed as they descended, deliberately, impossibly, and landed in the great flat basin below the highlands with a sound like the earth cracking open. Dust rose in walls. The ground trembled. Zara pressed her palm flat against the cliff face and felt the vibration move up through the stone and into her bones. Then silence. Then light. A brilliant white column shot upward from the basin, steady and unwavering, unlike any fire Zara had ever tended. It did not flicker. It did not breathe. It simply existed with a certainty that made torchlight seem like a child's game. "We go back to Elder Thane," Kovu said firmly. "We go forward," Zara said, standing. The argument was brief, as arguments with Zara always were. She moved with the kind of quiet authority that made people follow not from obligation but from instinct, as if her spine were made of something steadier than bone. Kovu fell into step behind her without another word. They descended the highland path in the last blue hour before true dark, moving through the twisted ironwood trees with practiced silence. The Stoneback clan had survived 300 generations in these lands by learning the language of quiet. When to be still, when to run, when to trust the prickling at the back of the neck that said something was watching. Something was watching now. Zara felt it long before she saw it. A pressure at the edge of her awareness, like a sound too low to hear but felt through the chest. She raised her fist. The column stopped instantly. Through the treeline, the basin opened before them, and in its center stood a structure that had not existed that morning. It was vast, taller than the oldest trees, wider than the clan's entire sleeping grounds, and it was made of something that was not stone, not wood, not bone. It caught the moonlight and held it differently, returning it in cool blues and silvers. Smooth surfaces met at angles that hurt to look at directly. And around it moved the giants. Zara had heard stories of large creatures, the tusked beasts, the great-necked things that moved through the southern marshes, but these were different. These stood upright like humans, but they were 3 times the height of the tallest man Kovu had ever known. Their bodies were encased in something that moved with them, close as skin but clearly not skin, reflecting the light from the structure. Their heads were large, dome-shaped, and behind the transparent covering that encased their faces, Zara could see eyes. Eyes that, even across this distance, were looking directly at her. "Back," Kovu whispered urgently. "Still," Zara replied. One of the giants separated from the others and walked, calmly, slowly, deliberately, toward the treeline where Zara's clan stood frozen. It stopped at the edge of the trees. Up close, it was even larger than she'd understood. Its covered hands, each finger separately defined within its strange outer skin, raised slowly, palms outward. A gesture. Open hands. No weapons. Zara knew that gesture. Every clan across every territory knew that gesture. "It is speaking to us," she said. In the oldest language. She stepped forward. The sound that emerged from the giant was nothing her ears could parse. A layered, resonant hum that seemed to come from multiple places in its body at once. But then a second sound followed, from a small device it raised to where its mouth would be, and this sound was different. Structured. Attempted. The shape of communication without the words. Zara responded the only way she could. She pressed her palm to her chest. "Zara," she said clearly. The giant was still for a long moment. Then it pressed what might have been its hand to the upper left portion of its chest covering. What came out sounded like Vexen. Behind her, she heard Kovu exhale slowly. She understood the feeling. Whatever was about to happen next, nothing about the world would ever be the same again. But in this moment, this impossible, thundering, history-bending moment, what Zara felt most clearly was not fear. It was curiosity. And perhaps that was the first truly human thing she ever gave to the stars. 6 weeks. That was how long it took Zara to understand that the giants were not gods. It had taken Elder Thane considerably longer. "They come from above the sky," Thane had said when Zara first brought Vexen, or rather the image of Vexen projected in light from a device the giant had provided, to the clan's cave gathering. "Things that come from above the sky are either ancestors or demons." This one raised open hands, Zara had replied. "Demons are clever. So are we. There had been silence after that, the kind that happened when Zara said something that was difficult to argue with. Thane was old and wise in the ways of the land, but he had never stood at the edge of a forest and made eye contact with something from beyond the sky. Zara had. That difference carried weight. The language learning had begun slowly, painfully, brilliantly. Vexen's people, the Veth, Zara would eventually understand them to be called, had a device they called Sarah, a language bridge mechanism that could analyze patterns in vocal sound and construct translation frameworks. It was an extraordinary tool. But it was also, Zara quickly realized, designed for species with very different communication styles. The Veth communicated in layered simultaneous frequencies. Humans communicated in sequential linear language. Sarah's early translations were charitably abstract. Sarah says you are bright surface reflection meaningful creature. Vexen communicated through the device early in the second week. Zara had considered this for a moment. Tell Sarah I am a person. Pause. Sarah does not have a category for person. Then Sarah needs a new category. It was Zara who had figured out the breakthrough. Not through any technology but through the oldest teaching tool her people had, cave walls. She had led Vexen and the small team of Veth scientists that traveled with them to the Red Mist Caves, named for the iron-rich dust that gave the morning air its color. The caves were filled with art made by Zara's ancestors across countless generations. Hand stencils, animal shapes, patterns of dots and lines that tracked the movements of the stars. Vexen had stood very still for a very long time looking at those walls. Your people recorded information. The device eventually translated with Sarah clearly still struggling. Yes, Zara said. We remember by showing. This is. Vexen's translated voice paused in a way Zara was beginning to recognize as emotion. This is earlier than we believed possible. You should not yet be doing this. Zara had tilted her head. Why? What followed was the first real conversation. Clumsy, incomplete, brilliant in its imperfection. The Veth had traveled across immense distances of space based on calculations that predicted which worlds would, in time, develop what they called resonant intelligence. Their calculations, apparently, had suggested that the creatures of this world were still at least 40,000 years from that threshold. Their calculations apparently were wrong. Zara spent the following days teaching Sarah. Not by letting it simply record her speech but by drawing on cave walls, showing concepts visually, then naming them, then demonstrating them in action. She created a bridge that ran not just between two languages but between two entirely different architectures of thought. Kova watched all of this with growing unease. You are teaching it how our minds work, he said one evening as the Veth scientists' camp lights glowed in the distance. Yes, Zara agreed. That does not worry you? It worries me less than not being understood. She paused. Kova, do you know what Vexen told me today? Through Sarah? What? That his people have visited 1,000 worlds. That on most of them the creatures they found were. She searched for the word. Sleeping. Not yet awake. Not yet thinking in ways that could reach across to another mind. She looked at the stars. We are the first in this part of the sky that they could actually talk to. Kova was quiet for a moment. Is that good or dangerous? Yes, said Zara. 2 days later, Sarah produced its first fully coherent translated sentence. Not an approximation, not a structural guess, but genuine meaning moving between two species for the first time in the history of this world. Vexen had said, through Sarah, clearly and with obvious effort, Zara of the Stoneback clan. We have come to study. We did not expect to be taught. We are grateful. Zara had pressed her palm to her chest. Then she had pressed it gently to the surface of Vexen's suit, the closest she could get to the gesture carrying human warmth. Then stay a while, she had said. There is much to learn. Across the Red Mist Caves, the paintings of 10,000 years of human life glowed in the Veth lights, and two species sat down together for the first time in history and tried to understand each other. It was, by any measure, the greatest thing that had happened on Earth since the first dawn. They had not been alone in the sky. Zara should have thought of this. She was the kind of person who thought of most things. But she had been so focused on the miracle of Vexen, on learning, on communicating, on the vast expansion of everything she understood the universe to be, that she had not stopped to ask the obvious question. If the Veth had found Earth, what else had? The second ships came from the east at midday, and they did not slow when they descended. They struck the ash plains like thrown stones, deliberately, violently, without any attempt at grace. Where the Veth ship had settled like a bird choosing a branch, these ships punched into the earth like fists. Vexen found Zara within minutes of the impact. The Veth commander's large eyes, she had learned to read Veth eyes, to her own continued amazement, were moving rapidly, which she now knew meant urgent distress. You must go, Sarah translated Vexen's rapid speech. Take your people. Move away from the water sources, away from the flatlands. Into terrain that is difficult to cross with large machinery. Who are they? Zara demanded. Pause. A terrible pause. The Drell. Zara had learned enough about the universe in 4 months to understand that a bad name said in a fearful voice meant something specific. Tell me. The Veth had a policy, careful, reasoned, developed over long experience, of non-interference with emerging species. They studied. They made contact only when contact was clearly welcome. They collected knowledge with what Zara had come to think of as reverence. The Drell had a different policy. The Drell were what happened, Vexen explained, when a species developed the technology to cross stars before they developed the wisdom to question why. The Drell did not study worlds. They assessed them. What could be taken? What could be used? What was in the way? Your people, Sarah translated, and Zara could hear the effort in Vexen's voice to control something, fear perhaps or grief, are in the way. It took Zara 4 seconds to make the decision. No, she said. Vexen's eyes shifted. I'm sorry? We do not leave. Zara turned to Kovu, who had been standing beside her with the expression of a man who had expected something exactly like this. Send runners to every clan within 2 days' travel. We gather at the Ashplane Ridge. Bring spears, bring fire, bring everyone who can move. Kovu was already moving. Zara. Vexen's translated voice was strained. You do not understand what the Drell are. Their weapons, the technology they carry. Can it be broken? Yes. But. Can it be burned? In theory, but. Can it be surprised? Zara looked up at Vexen's enormous form. You told me once that the Drell have never encountered a species at our stage that fought back. That they expect to walk into a world like ours and find creatures that run or hide. A long pause. Yes, that is true. Then they will be surprised. The Drell commander was called Oruk. Zara knew this because within 3 hours of landing, the Drell had established a broadcast system that sent sound across the ash plains, a declaration of dominance, a claim of ownership, a species announcing that this world now belonged to them. Zara had heard that kind of declaration before. Different words, same meaning. She had heard large animals bellow at the edge of a territory they intended to take. She had heard rival clan leaders announce war. She knew what came after the announcement. The Drell were large, not as large as the Veth, but built differently, lower to the ground, with multiple limbs and heads that swiveled independently, taking in more of their surroundings than any creature Zara had seen. They moved in formations, efficiently, sweeping toward the human settlements with the calm certainty of things that had never been stopped. They had not met humans before. The ridge attack was Kovu's design. Zara had asked him to plan it because Kovu understood violence the way she understood language, with depth and precision. He had organized 200 warriors across the ridgeline in overlapping groups, hidden by rock and brush, with fire waiting at 3 key points. Zara stood at the center. When the Drell reached the base of the ridge, they paused. Their scanning equipment, Vexen had described it to Zara in rapid, urgent detail, was looking for threats. It found 200 heat signatures in the rocks above because humans put out heat, and the Drell equipment could detect heat. Zara had counted on this. She stood up. Fully visible. Alone. The Drell scanners would have identified her as a single, small, warm-bodied creature posing no threat. The formations would have reported. One individual. Non-threatening. Continue. What the scanners couldn't fully account for was the burning oil that Zara's people had spent 3 hours pouring into the channels they'd carved into the ridgeline. Channels that Kovu had designed to run toward 3 specific points in the Drell formation. When Zara raised her hand, it was not a weapon she held. It was a torch. The fire moved down the ridge like something alive, and it hit 3 Drell power sources simultaneously, and those power sources, as Vexen had told her, were not designed to handle direct thermal overload at that concentration. The resulting explosions were extraordinary. In the chaos that followed, 200 warriors descended from the ridge, and the Drell, who had never been fought, who had never calculated for this, who had landed with the certainty of things that did not need to worry, discovered that something on this small, unremarkable world was willing to fight for it. That discovery cost them considerably more than they had planned to spend. Oruk retreated. Not fled. The Drell would not have a word for fled, but reassessed. Established a perimeter. Called for more information. Zara let them go. She had not planned to destroy them. She had planned to make them uncertain. Uncertain creatures make mistakes. She was counting on that. Elder Thane had lived long enough to have stopped being surprised by most things. He had seen floods, famines, lions taking people he loved, summers that cooked the earth to cracking. He had led the Stoneback clan through 30 years of disasters large and small. He had not been prepared for Zara to arrive at the Deepwater Coast camp with a Veth commander and a request to speak to the Drell. "You want," he repeated slowly, "to talk to the things that came to take our land." "Yes." "After setting them on fire." "Yes." Thane was quiet for a long moment, watching the southern sea move. "And you believe they will listen?" "I believe," Zara said carefully, "that they have never met anything they couldn't simply take. I believe that what we showed them on the ridge has made them uncertain. And I believe that uncertainty is the only opening we will get." She paused. "If we do not speak now, while they are still deciding what we are, they will finish deciding without us. And I do not want them to decide alone." Thane studied his granddaughter, which was what Zara was in spirit if not blood. He had raised her after her parents walked into a flooding river and did not return, with the particular attention of someone who is trying to find the flaw in an argument and cannot. "Go," he finally said. "But take Koval. And take enough fire to make a statement." The meeting at the Deepwater Coast was Vexen's idea and Oryx's grudging agreement. The Drell commander had spent 14 days since the ridge reassessing. Reassessment was not something the Drell did naturally, it was a muscle that had to be exercised, and for most Drell commanders, it had atrophied entirely. But Oryx was not most Drell commanders. Oryx was old, by Drell standards, and old things accumulate nuance whether they want to or not. The beach was neutral ground. Water on one side, open land on the other, nowhere for ambush in either direction. Zara had chosen it partly for this reason and partly because she had noticed in her weeks of observation that the Drell breathed differently near large bodies of water. Easier. More slowly. She had a theory that water had a calming effect on their biology. She filed this theory away. Oryx was the largest Drell she had seen, its body taking up space in a way that made the air around it seem compressed. Its multiple eyes oriented toward Zara with an unsettling independence. When it spoke, Sarah, extensively upgraded in the past weeks by Vexen's team, who had clearly been shaken into urgency by recent events, translated with remarkable clarity. "The small ones fought," Oryx said. It was not quite a question, not quite a statement. More like an observation that was still being processed. "Yes," Zara said. "Against Drell. With fire and rocks." "Yes." "And won." "Temporarily," Zara said honestly. "We created doubt. That is not the same as winning." Oryx's multiple eyes shifted. This honesty had apparently not been expected. "Why speak to us? You showed strength. You should build on it." "Because strength used only for fighting is wasteful," Zara replied. "And because you have things we need and we have something you want." A long pause. "You have nothing the Drell want." "You are wrong," Zara said, and the clarity in her voice left no room for misunderstanding. "What you want is to never be surprised again. What you want is to walk into a world and actually know, what you are walking into." She gestured at Sarah, at Vexen, at the cave paintings Vexen had photographed and carried in his memory systems. "We have been speaking to the Veth for 4 months. We have learned their language. We have taught them ours. We created a bridge between two entirely different ways of thinking." She let that settle. "We are, apparently, unusually good at this." Another pause. Oryx's many eyes moved in a pattern Zara didn't yet know how to read. "The Drell," Sarah translated carefully, "have encountered 97 species. None communicated with us. None survived too," Vexen added quietly from behind Zara. Zara kept her eyes on Oryx. "If the Drell want interpreters, real ones, not machines, not translation devices that miss the living feeling of a thought, we can be that. We can be the beings who speak both ways, who understand what other species mean, not just what they say." She pressed her palm to her chest. "But not for free. And not under threat. Equals. Or nothing." The wind off the water was cool. A wave broke. Oryx was still. Then, with a slowness that seemed deliberate, Oryx raised one of its limbs, not a weapon limb. Vexen had carefully briefed Zara on the difference, and pressed it flat, palm side down, in a gesture that Sarah translated as acknowledgement of standing. Not agreement. Not alliance. But recognition. It was, Vexen would later tell her, the first time in recorded Drell history that a Drell commander had offered that gesture to a species they had intended to displace. Zara walked back up the beach to where Koval waited. He handed her water. She drank. "Well?" he asked. "They'll be back," she said. "But differently." Is differently better? Zara looked at the sea, at the vast sky above it, at the particular brightness of the stars that she now knew were not simply lights but distances and worlds and other lives. Differently, she said, is the only direction we have. The girl's name was Lyra, and she was 10 cycles old, and she was the most relentlessly curious person Zara had ever met. Why does the Veth suit make that sound? Lyra would ask. Why does Vexen's head move that way when something surprises it? Why does Sarah sometimes get words wrong even now? How do stars stay up? What does the Drell language feel like before it's translated? Can I try? Zara had found her 3 months ago, sitting alone at the edge of the Veth camp's light perimeter, watching the scientists work with an expression of absolute concentration. Not afraid, not awed into stillness, just watching. Learning by watching. Zara had recognized the look. She had brought the girl inside. Vexen had not objected. Vexen had, in fact, been the one who first suggested that Lyra's questions were often better than the adult ones. More direct, less filtered by the assumption that some things were unanswerable. Lyra did not know what was supposed to be unanswerable. She asked anyway. 3 months after the Deepwater meeting, the Great Stoneback Meeting Grounds held something they had never held before. Members of 3 species all together, all still alive, and none of them trying to kill the others. It was, by most measures, an extraordinary achievement. Elder Thane had insisted on the gathering. He was dying, they all knew this, though it was unspoken, his body winding toward its end with the dignity of something that had endured a very long time. He wanted to see, he said, what came next. He wanted to see it while he still could. What came next was Zara, standing at the center of the grounds with Vexen beside her, a dozen Veth scientists arranged carefully around them, 2 Drell observers. Auric had sent them as a gesture that stopped just short of trust, watching from the eastern edge, and every person of the Stoneback clan and 7 allied clans assembled in a great ring around them all. 3 months ago, Zara said, and her voice carried in the way voices carry when a place has gone completely quiet, things came from the sky. We did not know what they were. We did not know if they meant harm or help. She paused. Some meant harm. Some meant understanding. Both changed us. She had thought a long time about what to say today. She was not naturally a speaker of crowds, she was a speaker of individuals, of small numbers, of the intimate and direct. But Thane had asked her to speak, and so she would. I want to tell you what I have learned, she continued. Not about the Veth. Not about the Drell. About us. The ring was very still. Every species the Veth have visited, and they have visited many, reached a point where the sky opened and something came through it. On most worlds that moment ended one way. The newcomers took, or the world closed, or the contact simply failed. She looked at Vexen, who was listening through Sarah with what she recognized as careful attention. We were supposed to be too early for this. Not ready. Our minds not yet shaped for the kind of thinking that reaches across species. She let a pause breathe. We were not ready. And we did it anyway. Lyra, seated near the front of the clan ring, was watching Zara with that complete attention of hers. Zara met her eyes briefly. I have spent months learning what makes us different. Not better, I am careful about that word, but different. We remember by telling stories. We plan for futures we will not live to see. We feel fear and choose anyway. We find enemies and offer hands. We teach our children to ask questions more than we teach them to accept answers. She paused. These things are not nothing. These things are, I have come to understand, rare. Vexen spoke, and Sarah translated immediately, clearly. In 942 visited worlds, the Veth have never encountered a species that initiated communication across a biological barrier using self-created symbolic language in the first contact encounter. Zara of the Stoneback clan did this within hours. We had prepared for the study of a pre-contact species. We were not prepared for a pre-contact species to be studying us. Several people in the ring were crying. Kovu was not, but only because he was Kovu. What does this mean? Thane asked from where he sat, wrapped in furs at the ring's edge, his voice still carrying further than his body looked capable of. For us. For our people. What does all of this mean? Zara looked at the sky. The day was clear, the sky that pale deep blue it became in the high afternoon, the blue that made you feel, if you looked at it long enough, like you were falling up. It means we are not alone, she said. It means the sky is not a ceiling. It means every child born after this day is born into a world that is larger than any world any of our ancestors imagined, and smaller too because we now know we share it. She paused. And it means we have a responsibility. Not to the Veth. Not to the Drell. To what we are. She crouched down to Lyra's level. Ask your questions, she said quietly. Keep asking them. teach your children to ask them. Never let anyone, not a giant, not a god, not a person with more certainty than sense, make you believe that the proper response to something unknown is silence. Lyra looked at her solemnly. What if the questions get scary? Zara smiled, the full, complicated smile of someone who has already been terrified and came out the other side knowing something. Then you are definitely asking the right questions. That evening, as the fires were lit and the Veth added their own lights to the gathering and even the two Drell observers moved, cautiously, closer to the warmth, Elder Thane found Zara sitting alone at the edge of the grounds, looking east. He sat beside her with the careful movements of great age. Are you afraid? He asked. Every day. Good. He was quiet for a moment. Fear that doesn't stop you is just information. She leaned against his shoulder the way she had as a child. Above them, the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, not just lights now, not just the familiar markers of season and direction, but distances and worlds, and the long patient possibility of other minds looking back. Somewhere in the camp, Lyra was asking Vexen 14 consecutive questions about the color of Veth's sky. Vexen was answering every single one. The world was 3.2 million years old and humans were very young, and the universe was vast and strange and full of things that were larger and older and more powerful. And the humans were not waiting. They were introducing themselves.